Daf Ches Amud Aleph will begin Daf Zayin Amud Beis at the very last line at the bottom. Ton Rabbanon, we learn in the Brisa, Ein Beit Kim Loy or Hachama. We do not search for chametz by the light of the sun, Veloy or Halvana, and not from the light of the moon, Veloy or Havuka, and not by the light of a torch, Ela or Haner, only rather from the light of a candle. You have to do b'dika with the light of a candle. Because the light of the candle is superior for b'dika. It's better, more effective for the b'dika for searching for the chametz. Even though it's not a proof, there is a zecher, an illusion like we learned previously. It says 7 days, lo yimot, sore should not be found in your homes. By Binyamin it says, Aloshin of Chipos. They searched, beginning with the oldest. I will search Yerushalayim with Neres, I'll search their Averas with Neres. So you see this link between Mitzvah and searching and Neres and Neres. So the best way to search is with the light of a candle. Now the Gemara is analyzing this price. Hi or hachama, when it says you can't use the light of the sun, what's the case? If we're talking that you're in a courtyard outside and it's sunlight, and it's saying that you can't search for the chametz using the sunlight, Rava says you don't have to do b'dika in a chatzar. Why is that? Because you have the ravens, the birds are there, and they eat the chametz. Whatever chametz might have been there, the birds eat it, so you don't need a b'dika there. So can't be to exclude that case. Ela ba'achsadra, maybe you'll say it's to exclude a pavilion. So what is an achsadra? Achsadra is a place where it's a pavilion, it has a roof, and it has posts, but it doesn't have walls. So therefore, since it has a roof, we can't assume that the birds came and ate the chametz. But it doesn't have walls, so it has bright sunlight. But he says, no, that can't be the case, because over there's so much sunlight that Rava said that you don't need a candle over there. You could rely on the sunlight. So you can't be to exclude that case, because there, in fact, you could rely on the sunlight. It's in a room, meaning so it's enclosed by walls. You don't have the bright sunlight, but there's a skylight. And so therefore the sun comes through the skylight. So which part of the room are we talking about? If it's opposite the skylight, so that in effect is like an achsadra. You have the sun coming straight down. There's so much bright light, you don't need a candle over there. The Gemara says, rather we're talking about on not opposite the skylight, so on the side. So you don't have that much bright light. You can't rely on the sunlight that's coming from the skylight. Over there, you have to, on the sides of the room, you have to use a candle. We're saying you have to use dafka candle. You cannot use a torch. Rava says, the pasuk says, v'noiga ka'ortia kanai miyada loy sham chavyenuzoi losid lovai. The light, the bright light for the tzaddikim will be like the light of Sheshanei Brachos. They'll be like rays of light. Rays of light will come to him from the hand of Hashem, and then we'll see the hidden strength of Hashem. What will the tzaddikim? The tzaddikim will be so much bright light from the tzaddikim, but what would they be compared to the shechina? Just taking a candle. Take a candle compared to a torch. A torch is so much bright light. You have one candle. The tzaddik will have so much light, but compared to the Rebbeinu Shalom, it'll be like a candle, a small candle compared to a huge torch. Rava, in a different context, Rava said, Avuka lavdala mitzvah min amuvchar. When we make havdalah, what we should use for the Borim Hara'esh is an avuka, torch, not just a candle. It has to have more than one wick. It has to be like a torch. So we see that a torch, the light of the torch is more than the candle. L'cher is a dover pella. Why are we bringing rayas? Obviously, one candle has a small amount of light, and a torch has so much more light. But l'cher perhaps we can say that what the Gemara means to say is that it's not only in the kamas and the quantity of light, but it's also in the eichot, it's the quality. It would seem to be that we're using the light of a torch, and it's giving the praise of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and we're making the bracha bor ma'areish and praising the Rebbeinu Shalom for the light. It would seem to be that the light of the torch is not only in quantity and kamas, but in echos and quality of light. Well, if it has more light and better quality light, why wouldn't you use it for bedika? Omar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, with the candle, it's small, so you can go into the cracks and crevices, into the small hidden places to check for the chametz. But the torch is large, you can't bring it into these small hidden places, the cracks and crevices. Rav Zvin Omar, of the candle, when you hold the candle, the light shines in front of you. So therefore you can properly do a bedika to search for the chametz that you're looking for. But when you have a torch, the light in front is too bright, so the usable light is in back of you. But that's not helpful when you want to do a search for the bedikas chametz, for the chametz before you. The light of the torch is so strong and powerful, you're afraid of causing a fire, so you won't be able to do a proper bedika. But the candle, you're not afraid, so you can do a proper bedika, and you can do it carefully. Ravino Amar Hai Mashach Nur, the light of the candle is steady, it doesn't flicker. V'hai Miktav Ketufi, but the light of the torch flickers, so therefore it's not effective to search for the chametz because there's bright spots and shadows, etc. It flickers, so it's not effective. Kol Malkim Shein Machnisim, the Mishnah says you have to search for chametz, but only in a place where you would normally bring in chametz. A place where you normally don't bring in chametz, you don't have to search for the chametz. Kol malkim lasuyamai. What does it mean? Any place. What is this including? It could have said malkim shein machnis by chametz. It says kol. What does it want to include by the word kol? Lasuya hadatana rabbanan, to include that what we learned in the braysa charei bais hal yonav atachtonim. If you have holes in the wall of a house that are very high or very low. So therefore, it's not really accessible. It's not easily accessible. So therefore, normally, even though you might store chametz in holes, but you would not store it in these types of holes. The gag hayitzir, the roof of an annex. An annex is a low structure, and it's next to the side or the back of the house, but it has a slanted roof. Now, normally you have to check the roofs, the gagais, because they use the gagais, but these roofs were not used. So normally you would not put chametz there, so it doesn't have to be checked for chametz. The gag hamigdal, or the roof of a tower or a closet, which is very high, so the interior has to be checked, but not the roof, because it's not usable, it's too high. The refes bakar, or a barn where there's cattle, so even if he did bring in chametz, the animals would have eaten it. Velulin, and chicken coops, umatfin, and a storehouse of straw. And these types of places you don't bring in, so by the chicken coop, the chickens would have eaten it, and the storehouses of straw you normally don't bring in chametz. Or storehouses of wine or oil, they don't need a bedika, because normally you don't bring in chametz into these places. So therefore we want to include, we say kol, to include all of these areas that don't need bedikas chametz. These ain't strichen bedika. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer mita ha'chalechs b'seich habayit. If you have a bed that uses a partition, you split the room, you put a bed, and the bed, now to split it up, you use one side of the bed for one purpose, the other side for a different room. Masechet, and it doesn't reach the bottom, meaning between the bottom of the bed and the floor, there's a space, there's a gap. So it's a usable area. Tzricha bedika, you have to do bedikas chametz, because he might have put the chametz on the ground between the bottom of the bed and the floor. So he might have used it for chametz over there. Reiminu, I'll ask you a stira. If there's a wall that separates two neighbors, two people, and there's a hole in the wall between the two neighbors. One neighbor, he stretches his hand, he searches for chametz, so in the depth of the hole as far as his hand will reach. And the other one, similarly, on his side, he stretches and reaches as far as he can to check. And v'hashar, and the rest of the thickness of the wall, mevatel believa, you don't have to check for chametz, you do a bittul belief, you're mevatel it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he says, if you have the bed that serves as a partition, and under the bed you put wood or you put stones under it, so you put things under the bed, but there's still a gap. You don't have to check that area where there's the gap. Kasha mita. So previously we said the mita needs a bedika, and kasha achorin, and it's a kasha steer in the case of the holes in the wall. Because previously we learned that the holes in the wall, the high ones and the low ones, don't need a bedika. And here Rav Shimon Gamliel says you check until as far as your hand will reach. So the Gemara answers chorin achorin loy kasha. It's not a kasha. The holes one case to the other, because the Brisa, the first one that says that they do not need a bedika, is talking where it's very high or very low. And therefore it's not practical, and people normally therefore would not put chametz over there. It's not easily accessible. The hub in Mitzin here, where we say you do need bedika, is talking where it's in the middle section of the wall, that it's more accessible and easily used, and therefore you have to be concerned that a person would put chametz over there. Mita loy kasha, it's also not a kasha in the mita, because the medallia, the medatoy. It's a difference if we're talking about the case where the first one, that the bed is high, the feet of the bed, the posts are high, meaning that there's a larger gap over there, there's a larger space, so therefore it is usable, accessible, and there's a chashash that he put chametz there. And Adam Tatoy, where it's talking where the bed is low, and therefore the gap, the space is low down, and therefore he's not likely to have used it for chametz because it's not easily accessible. Now the Gemara is analyzing this portion of the Brisa that says v'aisus yain ein tzriach bedika. It says that storehouses of wine you don't have to do bedikas chametz there. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa aisus yain tzarach bedika, aisus shemen ein tzarach bedika. The storehouses of wine you do have to do bedika, but not of oil. Gemara answers hachem ma'askin of mistapik. What are we talking about over here? We're talking about that it's a storehouse that if a person is now there's using his wine for his meal, and there's no more wine, so it's therefore if it's such a case that the storehouse is such that during the meal the shamus, the servant, would go bring more wine from the storehouse in the middle of the meal. It's something that it's used during the course of the meal. Now it's common, and those days especially, that the wine was a common beverage, and it was common that during the course of the meal they would run out, and the shamas would go, the servant would go and to bring some more wine from the storehouse. So if that's a situation that it's used during the course of the meal, you do need a bedika, because the shamas may have gone during the meal while he has bread in his mouth, bread in his hand, and there might have been therefore left some chametz in the storehouse, so you need a bedika. So, but where you say that you don't need bedika is when it's not that type of a scenario, where you don't have that type of a situation. So, I my skin mistapik. Well, if we're talking in the brisa that the yain needs a bedika, where it's mistapik, well, what's the difference between the yain and the shemen? Maybe he ran out of oil in the middle of the meal, and the shamas went to fetch some more oil. The more answers shemen yesh keva la'achila. You can estimate how much oil is going to be needed for a meal. So therefore, it's not likely that he would run out and then in the middle of the meal have to go and bring some more oil. There's a standard amount of oil that would have been used, but by drinking wine, it's very hard to estimate how much the people will be drinking. Yain and kevalishtiya, but for wine, it's not fixed, there's no set amount, and it's therefore more common that the wine will run out and he'll go and bring some more wine in the middle of the meal while he has chametz. Tani Rabbi Chia also oitzer shecha beBovel ka'oitzer yain be'Eretz Yisrael b'mistapek. In Bovel, shechar, the beer was a common drink. So just like we have this scenario in Eretz Yisrael with wine, in Bovel they would have a similar situation with shecher with beer, topic. When he would have a case that they would run out, the shamas would bring beer in the middle of the meal, and therefore in Bavel you would also have to do a bedika in that situation for the oysters of shecher. Omar of Chista big documents bedika. If you have a storage area, a pantry of fish, you don't need a bedika. Frankly, one of our time you will learn the Brisa tzricha bedika. You do need a bedika. So the more answers like kasha. Habarav where we say you don't need a bedika is talking about large fish. Over there you can estimate, same principle, you can estimate how much fish you're going to need of that type for the meal. It's not likely you'll run out in the middle of the meal to bring more. Hambazutri. But where we say you do need a bedika is talking about small fish, and that's the type of oyster that there is, and there it's common that they will run out and go bring some more, and therefore you have to do the bedika. The storehouses or the pantries of salt, or the storehouses of wax, the wax they use for candles. So over there you have to do bedika because it's common that they'll run out of salt. It's common that they will need more candles. That's the light they use at the meal, and he'll go into the pantry and bring these items and withholding chametz. Amar Papa Beit Siva Beit Hamre tzricha bedika. Similarly, he said a storehouse of wood and dates also needs bedika because these are the types of things that they could run out of and go and bring some during the meal while he's holding chametz. Tana, we learn in the Brisa in Mechayim Nois Lachni Zadol Chormus Sadokim Livdek. We're not Mechayiv a person to put his hands into holes and into crevices to search or to crack to search for chametz. Bibnei Sakana, because it could be dangerous. So therefore, we're not Mechayiv him to do that. My sakana, what is the sakana that we're dealing with? Sakana's akrav, because there might be scorpions in the wall, and he might be bitten by a scorpion. So ki mishtamish heishtamish. Well, how did he use it in the first place? How did he use the hole in the first place? If we're saying that the hole was used and there might be chametz there, and he really should do a bedika, but it's because of sakana he didn't. Well, if there is a sakana, he wouldn't have used the hole to begin with, so there's no chametz there to begin with. So obviously, there wouldn't be scorpions over there. So why do we say he doesn't have to do a bedika? If he used the hole and he might have put in chametz, then there's no sakana. He should have to do bedika. More answers leitzricha denafel. No, there was no scorpion. We're not chaysha that there was a scorpion in the wall while it was standing. It's not likely that there were scorpions there. But we're talking with after the wall collapsed. So he used it for chametz. He would have used it for chametz while it was standing because there was no chashash of akrav. But now it collapsed. Now it collapsed. It's more common that scorpions are there in a wall that collapse. Now, really, we would say he should do a bedika, but we don't because of sakana. Gemara asks, well, if the wall collapsed, even if there was chametz, you don't need a bedika. We learned in the Mishnah, chametz shenafal pilus. So you have chametz and a wall collapsed on it. The ruin collapsed on it. Right? It's not accessible. It's buried, so it's considered buried, and it's kind of mavur, so you don't need a bedika for that. So the Gemara answers, where do we say over there that you don't need a bedika? That's when the kelev the dog cannot search after, meaning it's more than 3 tefachim thick, deep, and therefore the dog doesn't smell the chametz, he doesn't dig after it, so there it's considered to be mavur. But over here it's not considered mavur. The depth of the rubble is not more than 3 tefachim. So strictly speaking, you would say that you would have to do a bedika. But mipnei sakana, because of the sakana's akrav, therefore we say you don't have to do a bedika. So here we're talking where the dog could search for it, but you don't have to do a bedika because it's considered to be a sakana. Taisus asks the kasha that why do we say that by the mapolis, we say the case of mapolis, we say that if the kelev could search for it, then we say that over there, we say if it's not 3 tefachim deep, you have to do bedika. It says, the Mishnah said over there, Chometz shenafel av hapilas, and so we're saying that it says, Harei kimavur, and we're saying, but that's only where the dog can't search for it. But if the dog could search for it, then in that case, you wouldn't have to do bedika. Now over here we're saying, in this case, even if it's okay, we're saying that we're talking over here that it's not that deep. Now the case before it says the Mishnah is Chometz shenafel av hapilas, it's mavur. What are we saying? Where is that mavur? Only if it's more than 3 tvachim deep. There's mavur. Otherwise, you do have to do bedika. But over here, we're saying the wall collapsed, and even if it's not 3 tvachim deep, you don't have to do it because of sakana. Well, over there also, it's why is it only kimavur if it's more than 3 tvachim deep? Why don't we say even if it's not, there's a sakana and you shouldn't have to do it? Taisus answers. He says, in the case over here we're talking about, we don't know that there's chametz there. There was a wall, there was a hole, and a person might have used it for chametz. We don't know that there's chametz. If the wall collapsed, there might be a scorpion, and since we don't know that there's chametz, we say you don't have to do bedika. But that case in the Mishnah was talking about chametz shenafel av hapilas. We know that there was chametz. There's certainly chametz there, and the wall collapsed and fell on it. So there we would say, since you know there's chametz, even though there's perhaps a sakana of the scorpion, but you would have to hire people to dig it up, and if they dig it with the shovels, etc., then you don't have a sakana. It's only by hand. We would obligate you to spend the money to hire people to remove the chametz, because there we knew that there was chametz. If it's more than 3 tvachim more deep, then it's kimavur. If it's less, then you would have to hire people to remove it. Here, we're talking in a case where we don't know that there's chametz, that perhaps there is chametz. So therefore we say, well, if the wall collapsed, now there might be a sakana of scorpions, you don't have to do a bedika, even if it's less than 3 tvachim deep. Frank the Gemara, while you're saying you don't have to do the bedika because of sakana, why are we concerned about a sakana? That people who are performing a mitzvah, they don't have to work. They're a shluch mitzvah. They sent out. They're engaged in doing a mitzvah. They're not harmed. So why are we concerned over here about the sakana? We must say over here that the sakana of the scorpion is only a possibility. It's not that we're certain or that it's even likely that there are scorpions, because if there are, we don't say shluchei mitzvah in hezekim, where it's shlicha hezeka, where the hezek is common, where it's likely. We don't apply this principle of shluchei mitzvah in hezekim. Therefore, of course, we must say over here that the sakana of the scorpion that we're talking about is a possibility, not a likelihood. Al kol panim, so why are we concerned about the possibility of the akrav? Ay shluchei mitzvah in hezekim. We're afraid that he is looking for chametz, but he might have lost the needle as well, and he might, in addition to be searching for chametz, be searching for his own personal item, for his needle, and on that, then it's not a mitzvah. So, legabe that, we would say it's not considered a shluchei mitzvah, and therefore we would not treat him as a shluchei mitzvah, and we would not say in hezekim, and then there might be a sakana. Is this not considered a mitzvah, even though he has a personal benefit? I'll tell you, we learned in the Brisa, if a person says that this salah, he wants to give this for tzedakah, but he has an ulterior motive. He wants that the schus of that should be that his son should live, or he's doing it, he has an ulterior motive, he wants to be ben olam haba, or he's a tzaddik gomer, we treat him as a tzaddik gomer, we treat him as a complete tzaddik. Taisus, Rashi and Taisus have explained that the meaning is we don't consider him a tzaddik gomer in all areas, but legabe this mitzvah, we consider he's doing it as a tzaddik gomer in the performance of this mitzvah. He's treated, even though he has an ulterior motive, we consider this mitzvah of tzedakah that he's doing as a pure, complete mitzvah. So here also, even if he does have an ulterior motive, we should consider him to be a tzaddik, and therefore we should say shluchei mitzvah and nizaykin. More answers, maybe after he finishes the bedika, asal yuna basra, then he'll continue to search for the needle, and at that point he's not performing any mitzvah. At that point he's only taking care of his personal needs, and therefore we would not say shluchei mitzvah and nizaykim. So because of that chashash, we say you don't have to do the bedika. Rav Elchanan is medayik from here that if a person does a mitzvah with only his own personal motive, he only has his own personal motive at heart, then he's not considered shluchei mitzvah, even in a case where it's a mitzvah where you don't need a kavanah lishma, even though you don't need a specific kavanah, like the case of tzedakah. Nevertheless, if he would only have a personal motive in mind, then it would not be considered shluchei mitzvah. On the other hand, he says, if you have both in mind, both to do the mitzvah and for a personal motive, even in a case where there is a mitzvah to do it lishma, where you do need a kavanah for the mitzvah, nevertheless, legabe shluchei mitzvah, we would still consider him to be a shluchei mitzvah, even though in addition to the mitzvah he has his ulterior motive, he would still be considered to be a shluchei mitzvah.